In this video, we're going to do a follow-up to our last video about armatures, and particularly, in this case, looking at kind of a mechanical design for it and how we might use that and also how we can get it to work. So I made a really simple robotic arm, and right now it's being deformed by the armature. If I do Shift Z here, I can actually see it pretty well, and I actually set up an object to help me control the arm. So as I move that object either up or down, it will respond to that. If I move the object out of reach of the arm, it actually kind of stretches full length to get there. And if I move it sideways, it will move sideways. And you can see that the head of the arm actually rotates to accommodate that too. Even if I go into my armature and if I rotate the base, so I'm going to do RZ there, I can see that the armature actually twists around, but since it's following that sphere, it's doing that intentionally. However, if I take the ball and let's move it closer down like this, now if I rotate my armature, you can see that it kind of moves a bit. Let me move it a little bit off center too. I'm going to go and select my sphere here that I have it going towards, so it's a little bit to the side, and we can rotate that again. So it just rotates however it needs to reach that object, and so since it can there pretty well, that's just the way it's going to be for this one. So I'm going to show you guys how I did that really quick here, and I'm going to minimize that. Here's the structure. I put in a armature going up and just use the orthographic view from the side. This bone here is my root, and it's just what controls things as it goes around. So I can, right here I have it, tab into it, here we go. Click that bone, and this is root. I have it so that it deforms nothing, even though I don't have this unchecked. There's no groups that this hooks to. And I can check that by going to, or there shouldn't be any groups that it connects to. So we're going to change that. So I'm going to go to my object that I have. So I'm going to tab in. Each of these sections here I have as loose parts from each other. So if I hit L over them, I can select different groups here, and they're all separated, which is kind of important for what we're doing here. I'm going to take my root. I'm going to say select to see if it grabs anything. Again, I don't want the root to deform anything, so I'm going to click on remove. If I go over my viewport, I click A to deselect, and then I hit over here in the vertex groups, if I say select, nothing's selected because there's no vertices associated with those groups. And that's kind of what I want to do. When I paired this, rather than just create my own vertex groups, since I had already named each of the bones, I went ahead and had it do like it did with the cube, just because the cube like that one, because that way it created every vertex group for me. All I have to do is unassign and then reassign things as I want. So I'm going to go and click on turn here, and I'm going to just select everything in the scene. I'm going to say remove, and I'm just going to go through each of these and click on remove. That'll remove every vertice from every single one of those objects. And then that way I can tell exactly which ones I add back to them. So now these things have nothing. If I hit A to deselect and I select one of them, I say select, nothing appears. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on the turntable section here. I'm going to just hover over it and use L to select all the linked devices there. And this is going to turn along with the arm here that I have. So I'm going to select, actually I'm not going to select that point. So Shift L to deselect those vertices, but I want this to be part of that turntable. So I'm going to go and select turn here. I'm going to say assign, and then I go over the screen, hit A to deselect. I'm going to select the sphere and the next section up, and we're going to do that as section 1. I'm going to do assign. I'm going to go to the next section up and hit L and do the sphere and that next section, and I'm going to go to section 2, click assign. And then my right pivot and my left pivot are where it forks up here. I don't want those to be causing any deformation at all. Actually, I do want, though, this sphere to be part of this. So I'm going to select that top sphere. I'm going to say assign. And then I'm going to go into these. I'm going to select the sphere. They're actually going to deselect everything first. Select the little tiny sphere at the base and the cylinder. And I'm going to go to where it says right first, and I'm going to click assign. And then I'm going to do on this one, I'm going to deselect everything. Hit A to do that. I'm going to select the sphere and the cylinder and that one. And I'm going to assign on the right last. And the reason why I have the left and right backwards to us is I'm thinking of it as being facing us, and so I've selected it. I have the left and right labeled backwards to what we'd be used to. So over on the right side of my object here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so I can actually get these objects. There we go. And I'm going to make sure that I go to left first and do assign, and then A to deselect. Do L there and L there. There we go. L there. There we go. So that's going to be my left last. I'm going to do assign. Now, if I tab out of object mode and I go into my armature, if I do Control Tab, I go into pose mode, and in pose mode I can move things around. So right now, if I rotate this base, I can just rotate sideways here, and it shouldn't move like that the way I have it designed. I didn't design it to move like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a constraint for this bone. I'm going to go to the little bone icon with the chain by it, click on Add Bone Constraint, go down to where it says Limit Rotation, and then I'm going to say Limit X, Y, and Z. You'll notice that when I clicked Limit X, it just kind of fell down on its side there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this for its minimum to be 90 and its maximum to be 90 on the x-axis. And now it's standing straight up. Now if I go over it and I hit R, regardless of the angle that I'm at, it doesn't move in that direction. Actually, I don't want to limit Z. Let's do that. Now, if I hit R, now it can rotate around any of those directions. I'm going to hit Escape to undo that. I'm going to click on this bone that goes up towards the two parts here separating, and we're going to add another type of constraint. So under Tracking, we're going to go down to where it says Inverse Kinematics, and I'm going to select, right now I don't have a target object in here, so I'm going to do tab out of this. I'm going to do Shift A, and I'm still actually in that there, so I undid that. I'm going to Control Tab twice out of it to get into object mode. I'm going to do Shift A, and I'm going to select, I'm going to go ahead and put in an empty this time rather than a sphere like I did in the last one. And I'm just going to say plane axes. And so here I have this little grid here. I'm going to go back into my my armature, and I'm going to do Control Tab, and I'm going to select the top one where I was adding this target. I'm going to go and select down here where it says empty, and right now you can see like the whole thing is like bending towards that to get there. If I move this in any way, everything is moving to get there. So what I want to do is in that constraint, go back to this one, I want to change the chain length. So now 1 will give me just that top part moving. So here I can control it going up and down. It's just going to try to point right towards where that empty is. And if I go and select, for instance, back onto the bone here, if I add 2, then I get the 2 top parts of the arm, which is actually kind of how this is designed. So, and it'll go straight towards it until it gets within reach, and then it'll bend automatically for me, and I can easily animate that and set it up. So I can animate the empty to have it track back and forth pretty easily, and that's pretty much the basics for that. So that's one way you can do it. You can do it with a more longer chain if you want, and you can experiment with those different constraints to see what they'll do. If you want something not to move in a particular direction or something, they're very handy for setting some of those bounds. If you have a really complex shape, you might find yourself putting in lots of constraints. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind there. I didn't do this one. I'm not sure exactly how that would affect it. I haven't played around with it at all. And other things I just kind of left in default. You can change the weight, too, of that constraint, which is kind of cool. So some influence actually is what I was looking at. So that's from its default down to how much it actually is reaching towards that. So if you have more than one constraint on it, like the going to like an empty or something like that, you can affect how that's going to pull at this shape. Sometimes doing something like that with, say like joints like elbows or kneecaps on a skeleton and having them point towards other objects is very useful so that you can control that armature even more. So those are some things to remember there.